proverb says, tomorrow never comes. There is no such thing as tomorrow. There never will be, because time is always now.
Welcome to the Philosophical Minds Podcast, the podcast about the stuff we wonder about.
And other things.
All right, so we are joined today by the American Sheriff himself, Sheriff Mark Lamb. Mark is a lover of God, family, freedom, and guns, and can't argue with any of that, man. So, first of all, I wanted to pay you some compliments. I wanted to say this. I've been observing you for a while now, and you've got a real jovial spirit, and overall just like a genuine positive kind of fun vibe about yourself. And to me personally, and I think for a lot of people, those seemingly small character aspects are actually really important and go a long way, and especially in the midst of all this recent chaos and uncertain times that we're living through. And you're just out there doing your thing and maintaining that contagious smile, man. And so my hat's off to you in that sense. If I had a hat. But yeah, you genuinely do embody leadership qualities in my estimation, and you appear to walk the walk, and that's kind of like a rarity these days from my perspective. But yeah, I think you're out there and you're inspiring others and changing the game in that regard, if there's a game to be changed. But anyway, I'm grateful to be able to talk with you today, and welcome to the show.
All right, well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, and thank you for the kind words.
Absolutely. So yeah, again, I appreciate you doing this. You're in a very important role out there as a sheriff, and you've got a lot of eyes and ears on you out there. And I'm sure you obviously enjoy this position very much, and it seems like you're very kind of built for it. And I'm curious, for you personally, is it tough handling the high pressure and weight of responsibility, or do you even see it that way? Or maybe you don't. I don't know. Enlighten me if you would, because it seems like as a public-facing law enforcement representative in any capacity these days, it appears it would not go without its fair share of challenges. So I'm kind of wondering how you navigate all that and maintain your sanity at the end of the day.
You know, that's a great question. I mean, being a sheriff is even a little bit more different than just being in law enforcement, let's say as a chief of police, because not only am I juggling this, how the sentiment is towards law enforcement, or at least how the media and certain people would want you to believe the sentiment is. Because I think when you really crack it open, 70% or more, maybe even higher of Americans still believe in law enforcement. They support law enforcement. So I think that the media would have you believe different. Now, having said that, being a sheriff's a little bit different, because not only am I in the law enforcement aspect of it, I have the political side too. And so you constantly have haters, whether it's people who hate police, whether it's people who are your enemies on the political field. It is honestly nonstop. It never ends. And then if you're trying to do anything good, new levels bring on new devils. And so you've got people out there just constantly waiting in the weeds to try to take you down every chance they get. And because you're a public official, they can say whatever they want about you, and there's no recourse to it. So all of those things make this job very difficult. It never ends. Your social media never stops. Your emails never stop coming in. It is nonstop. And it is a little difficult. It's taken, the longer you do it, the tougher you become, the more thick skin you become, the more, like anything, the more you do it, the more practice, the more experience, just the more equipped you become emotionally, physically, everything to deal with what we deal with. So it is a heavy job, but somebody has to do it. And this job will take the best you have and not give anything. I can't say it doesn't give anything back, because my life has been extremely rewarded. But for those rewards, there's also equal payment due on the backside. So it is a tough thing, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I'm glad you're out there doing it. So yeah, and I want it to be known to you and the listeners that I believe we definitely need law enforcement, or at least, a protective body that's empowered and out there helping maintain peace and harmony within society, and I don't think the elimination of law enforcement is a good idea at all. I mean, for example, I think about that Chaz autonomous zone thing in Seattle. I mean, that's a pretty epic fail. And I mean, I'm all about reform, but these people out there burning police cars and calling for the abolishment of the police altogether based off of some bad apples is the wrong answer in my estimation. And I think, law enforcement, it can be a beautiful thing if done correctly, speaking objectively, although I can get philosophical quickly on a personal level about like enforcing laws I personally think are preposterous, but that's just legislation probs. But I really want at this point in time to engage, locally in whatever little ways that I'm able to kind of heal citizen police relations and kind of heal the divisions and whatnot. And I want to lead by example in that regard. I think these are important conversations to have. And ultimately, I believe at the end of the day that you, sir, and I are both lovers and defenders of freedom. Ashley, of course, as well. Although we play different roles, how we go about with our approaches. I mean, I'm over here behind a computer screen. You're out there kicking ass in the streets. But yeah, so anyway, I wanted to get your take on this notion of freedom and to what extent you would like to see freedom flourish in many areas and where you draw the line with some things. I mean, some people's version of freedom is much more relaxed approach to, say, like drug legalizations, for example. In the case of things like, think of like medicinal mushrooms as they're being studied with astounding results and, very statistically significant data backing them up with like remarkable treatments for things like PTSD, for example. So, these are extremely different substances than say things like fentanyl or black tar heroin or crystal meth or whatever. And yeah, but if you could maybe just touch on your notion of freedom, what does a free country look like in your estimation? How would you structure it if it were in your hands? And where do the boundaries kind of lie for you? Like free, but how free? You know what I mean? And yeah,
and a lot of people don't understand what true freedom is. Look, there are people that believe that you can't just have freedom with no rule of law or any rules in society. You'll have anarchy, and that's what a society without law and order is anarchy. And then anything can happen. Let's say using drugs. Somebody is free to use drugs. There's nobody standing at their house knocking it out of their hands whenever they are attempting to use it in private. That's taking away somebody's complete freedom. They have the freedom to use it, but what we've gotten away from in America is accepting that there are consequences for freedom. Like, I'm free to say whatever I want, but I might not get voted back in 4 years if I do that. You are free to go out and break into somebody's car, but there is a consequence to that. So a lot of people think that you should be free without consequence, and you can't have that. Our society will blow up if we do that. Anarchy will ensue, and we will have no country. And then what happens is somebody comes in, and to fix it, you have to take away people's freedom, legitimately take away their freedom. And so freedom is a fine balance, and I believe that a lot of people don't understand freedom. And with freedom comes responsibility, and we're losing that responsibility in this country. We're losing that personal responsibility. We don't want to hold ourselves accountable for our actions. We want to blame other people. And our freedom is contingent upon us being able to maintain the rule of law and to be able to have police out there, protecting our streets. Because if somebody all of a sudden starts using drugs, they're using their freedom. And you're telling me if we don't hold them responsible, the next thing you know, because I've seen it firsthand, they're breaking into my house and taking my stuff and impeding on my freedom. So you cannot have anarchy because it impedes on other people's freedoms. And so freedom is a very beautiful thing, and it is a very complex beast. But I am 100% in support of people living a free life, making decisions. If you want to marry a man or a woman, I don't really get whether I believe in it or don't believe in it. I'm not going to impede your right to do those things. Where I do get involved is if we as a society have set rules and laws in place and you violate those rules and you are caught doing so, then there's a price that needs to be paid. There are consequences. That's what people don't understand. Freedom has consequences. And so if I could convey one thing, it's not that your freedoms are being taken away by the rule of law. It's that you don't like being held accountable for you exercising your freedom. And that's it. That's the bottom line. And we can't let society fail because we want to let people just do whatever and run amok. I don't run my household. I got 5 kids. I don't do that. And any parent that does needs to go to a parenting class. There needs to be rules. There needs to be discipline in place, and there needs to be things, because the kids are not, you can't just let them run amok.
You just said the word discipline. Discipline equals freedom.
That's right.
So I wanted to touch back on this issue of the media with you, and the way the media kind of gets hijacked, and the way it paints pictures. It can be used for good or bad, and fortunately, you've been able to make many appearances on the media to give your perspective, and I think that's like of giant importance, and it'd be great to see some kind of fair representation or more airtime given to law enforcement in that regard to kind of discuss various issues. Because one of the giant issues, let's look at like the George Floyd thing, for example, and I've got eyes and ears all over, so I get a lot of intel coming in, and take it for what it's worth. But just think about this: the possibility that those officers and George Floyd were just maybe involved in a money laundering scheme together, and Floyd was going to testify against him. So when it kind of gets spun into a racial motivation thing, and then the media takes it and runs with it and kind of eliminates and creates this issue. I know how this works, because I used to do this. I used to do this thing in high school. Please don't judge me. Anyway, I'd go up to, say, Bob, and I'd say, "Hey, Bob, Tom's been talking crap and telling everybody he's going to kick your ass." Then I'd go up to Tom and I'd say, "Hey, Bob wants to fight. He thinks that you don't stand a chance. Church parking lot, 5 o'clock. There's going to be 50 people there. No weapons. No one's going to jump in. Are you guys down?" It's generating hype and instigating and creating a divisive situation. And my motivation, I'm getting entertainment out of it. I'm gonna film this fight. It's gonna be, for whatever reasons. And there's groups out there, unfortunately, that I feel like profit off of keeping us divided, and they have motivation financially and sowing that division. So I'm curious, what's your thoughts on this? Am I delusional in that regard, or what do you think about that?
Well, is your question, are people creating division on purpose?
Yes, from your
Absolutely.
perspective.
Absolutely. People that have objectives and motives, the way you keep people from, figuring out your objectives and motives is you get those other 2 people to fight each other. We in this society, the media, politicians, they're using race. They're using a lot of different things. They're creating a division between the people and law enforcement. They're creating divisions all the way across, when in reality, those who are creating that division, we as a people are all together. We're all in it for the same thing. It's the media and those politicians, or those people who have an agenda. Those are the people that we need to really kind of rally together against, because and I'm not, when I say rally together against, I mean in a peaceful manner, just in case somebody's not, we need to come together as a people and use the resources and the things that our founding fathers set up to change that, because those are the people that are truly trying to divide this country. You hear talk about people saying they want to reinvent America. When you want to reinvent America, you got to tear it down to the base and then rebuild it. And that's what's happening, is they want to tear it down to the base, even get rid of the foundation and pour a new foundation and a whole new thing. And based on what I can see and what these people are saying, it is based on socialism and communistic views, and that is doesn't coincide with what America it was founded on and stands for. So yes, there are people that are divisive. Look, in my profession, we see the worst of the worst. So when people say, "Well, Sheriff, is that person capable of that?" Yes, absolutely. Because I've seen people capable of much worse than what you think they are. I've seen some heinous things that humans are capable of. And so, uh, yeah, I absolutely believe that there are people with agendas that want to see us fighting with each other as opposed to standing together for America, for freedom, and for the things that we love, for our individuality, for respecting one another's differences, and not only of opinions but of cultural backgrounds, of social backgrounds, of our personal choices. These are the things that we do a better job of respecting, and let's not let them drive a wedge between us, because we the people truly are. We're all in it together. We want to live free, and we want to be happy and have great families, and keep a roof over our head. And those are the things we want. We've got other people that want to divide us, and we need to stand against it.
Amen to that. Did you have any thoughts or responses to that, Ashley?
Yeah, well, earlier when you were discussing, discipline, I think that people associate that with law enforcement in a more physical means or, brutal way, and not people in general, but specifically people who've been apprehended by law enforcement. As an attorney, I have represented DUI clients, and if they're in a bad spot and have something happen, I make sure that they have their right to the procedure and the process that goes with that. I've had clients that, big, tough, 250-pound guy who was terrified going into court, and I mean, just shaking. And he was a truck driver, and, that fear, sometimes it's heightened by media coverage of events and exaggerations of what law enforcement does. I've been driving up to Winslow before and seen law enforcement pulled over on the side of a road helping someone change a tire. I think people forget that aspect of it. And with discipline in general from the legislative side, it's very difficult because there is so much legislation that gets passed every year. For attorneys, it's very complicated and difficult to keep up with. And then that legislation, once it's passed, it has to be, passed on to law enforcement. Law enforcement has to be trained with it. And when you have judges and attorneys that can't even settle what the law is, that's why they're there. It's a lot of pressure, I think, placed on law enforcement to try to decipher, how to implement certain things, and the training they get at the department level, if there's enough tax dollars there. There's so much that goes into it that I think that people lose sight of how difficult of a job it is. And, to your statement about discipline, a society without rule of law, it's kind of like trying to play a basketball game with various rules from football and volleyball. It would never work. For a society to coexist, you need a baseline set of rules. And we live in a democratic republic where we are fortunate enough, to have people vote elected officials that they believe will make good legislation. And then we also get to vote on certain legislation. And so we're part of that process. And that process thrives on everyone consenting to follow the rules. If you have an issue with a law, there is a process to violate that law in court or through the proper means, but it has to be orderly. Otherwise, you do have chaos, and you have, freedom is not something that just is an independent issue. It's, your actions might impede on another person's freedom. And a lot of our laws are set up to protect those freedoms as well. So I think people forget about that interplay. So, I think that you said it very well earlier. You're touching on a lot of issues that have been on my mind lately. So very well.
Yeah. And look, I'll be the first to tell you, I think that a lot of people are scared to go through the system because we've watched the system fail recently. We've watched the courts fail people. We've watched that there are no recourse. I'll be the first to tell you, I see a lot of people with no means that have to go through the court. They get a public defender, and the full weight of the law comes down on some of these people. And then you take somebody else who's able to afford an attorney, and they're able to do a much better job, fighting for themselves with the help of an attorney. and sometimes they don't get held as responsible. Look, my son recently had an issue where he ended up getting charged with a DUI, and he's paying for an attorney. We're paying for an attorney as a family, and it's a lose-lose situation for me, because either he goes to prison or he maybe gets probation, and then everybody's going to say that I did something to get him off, which I didn't. The only thing I did was help pay for an attorney. And there's a lot of people out there that can't afford that. And it's unfortunate that the law is the way it is, because there's a lot of the court is so full that you've got county attorneys pushing for plea agreements, and where these people would probably win if they were to go to trial, they do a plea agreement and they end up taking a charge because they just can't afford to go to court. They can't afford an attorney. So look, we've got a lot of work to do on the system. I think the system has fallen apart over time, and you're seeing that frustration on a national level, and people are expressing it in many different ways. Whether you're on the right or the left or in the middle, there are people expressing that frustration in different ways, and they're dividing us through that, when in reality, what we are all frustrated with is the system. We're frustrated with the same politicians that have been in there for 40 plus years and trying to tell us that we're the problem, when in reality, they're the ones that have created the laws that have put us in the position we're in. So that's a whole, I can go on about this for days, but I think that kind of touches on some of the things, and it's unfortunate that we are where we are. I feel for those people that can't afford to defend themselves appropriately, because they end up, facing the full weight of the law, and it's sad where you see it. I try to take a very human approach to the way I do the job. Unfortunately, I can't be on every call, and that's not to say that I'm soft on people. When people need to pay a price, they need to pay a price. But because you get a DUI, or because you have a one incident, it doesn't make you a bad person. That's a regular person who made a mistake. There are a very small percentage of bad people out there, people who are monsters. If you let them loose in society, they're going to take advantage of other people, and they don't care one bit about other people. Those are the people that we, honestly should be in prison. But those people that make mistakes, and we need to do a better job of finding them the help they need to get through the mistake, hold them accountable. But I don't know that I think the system in many cases is failing people.
Well said.
We went down a whole different road there. I'm sorry, Ashley.
No, that's great. I mean, that still speaks to kind of exactly what this all deals with, because we're really looking at the system at large, and there's, over time it gets more complex, because there are more laws that are passed, and then there are laws that stay on the books, and it's not that the laws become less and less, we only get more. So that creates the problem and that frustration of, so many different legislators. Some of them are phenomenal, and they look into the issues and they take time, but you have other ones that it's more of a political agenda, where they're just trying to get voted back in, or they know that they don't have to deal with the weight of being voted back in. So you have multiple, facets to it. And I think that it creates this frustration, for people in this country as a whole, when we see it getting more and more complex. And, I studied comm theory in undergrad, and then poli-sci, they talk about uncertainty reduction, and how you have more uncertainty when things are too complex to understand and grasp, and uncertainty is directly linked to fear. And so the more uncertain you become about, what the rules are, or how what your part should be, the more you see fear kind of play out, and then anger follows. And I think we're in that time right now where things have become so uncertain. Expectations are so unknown at this point, that it's created this larger frustration. And some people direct it in the wrong paths. They don't really know where to direct that anger and frustration. And unfortunately, it falls on people who are trying to help a lot of times, I think. So,
and as a society, we need to do a better job of addressing, because we've been left holding the bag for the mental health issues. We have sheriffs, they started closing all these facilities down, and then the jails became the home for mental health, which is not fair to those people. It's not fair to the counties, the sheriffs, the jails. We're not equipped for that. And then you have the drug addiction problems, which are increasing on a daily basis, especially if you talk about opening borders. We're increasing the amount of fentanyl and methamphetamines and other dangerous drugs that are coming into this country. You're going to see more and more addiction problems, especially coming off of 2020 and 2021, where people are not working or people are depressed or anxiety. And that problem is only going to be exacerbated through these last year and a half. And we don't have the programs or different things in place to help these people through their addiction, through mental health. And the jail is definitely not the place for these people most times.
And that, I actually practice immigration law, and this is an issue that comes up quite often because first, hearing about the issues, I myself years ago, 15 years ago, married a German man that I met in London when I studied abroad. And we had to go through, almost a year of filing the appropriate papers to get him, permanent residency. And I had a child on the way. I was working full time. That process, that was far before I was an attorney. And it was daunting for someone who was legal minded. And I knew that I wanted to, go on to law school. I was an undergrad. And I've spoken to so many people about that process. And I think that there's a misunderstanding of, what open borders does mean and different legislation, in regards to enforcing immigration laws. The side I see of it, because I'm selective in who I choose as my clients. I have clients who there was a family of 4 that had come over claiming asylum. And that was, a law that was passed under USCIS and federal immigration laws, where if someone was seeking escape or, status to be protected because of their religious beliefs, they were being persecuted and targeted, they could come to the US, claim asylum, and they have to sit in the jail, which is very odd because immigration law is considered civil. But yet, as they're waiting for certain claims of relief, they have to wait in jail. And sometimes, the judge will set the bond. It depends on, the likelihood of them returning. There's all of these things that have to go into it. So this family of 4 hired an attorney, and he litigated the case for about 5 years. And I get a phone call that they couldn't get a hold of their lawyer, and they had paid, I believe, $45,000 was around the amount. And they said, we need help. We don't know what's going on with our case. It was up at the Ninth Circuit at that time. And they had provided all of this documentation and evidence, and the attorney had not submitted and had not filed. It took me a few months to get a hold of that lawyer and say, hey, I'm going to take over the case. Can you give me what you have? And that's, I think, a disconnect as well, as sometimes the attorneys in that field let their clients down when they have, a valid claim for relief. Long story short, this family, after 7 years of litigation, finally were able to get permanent residency. To get that, they had to, show complete persecution. They were actually Christians, and they were living in Lebanon. And the father's bakery was lit on fire. They would used to cross the border for where all of the businesses were. And in that environment, they had, people with guns waiting at that border, and they would have to pay them to be able to go and do, their business or their deliveries. Very different, overseas. And so when we finally got that case resolved, it's things like that. The 2 children for the couple were in college, not any criminal history. We had to show that to the judge. It's such a rigorous, process they have to go through. And so my question to you would be, just kind of hearing that perspective a little bit, what do you consider open borders? And, does that encompass laws like that consider asylum as a form of release or relief and things like that?
Well, that's a complex issue in and of itself, but I'm going to tell you right now, the immigration stuff is jacked up. Like, I'm all for people coming here to make a better life for themselves, 100%. but you have to do it legally. Look, I have a cousin who is American who's married to a Panamanian, or not a cousin, my nephew. They have a child who was born here in America, and she can't come from Panama to America right now. And yet we're going to let people just cross the border unchecked, no COVID tests, no nothing, no background checks, no nothing. We're just going to just say, hey, come on in. What about all those people who have worked hard, who spent 7 years trying to get their immigration, or those people who have paid or who have waited in another country and done it the right way? It is completely unfair to those people to allow open borders. If you want to fix the immigration issue, then fix it. Stop complaining about it, stop fighting about it, and stop using it as a political tool. It absolutely needs to be fixed. And this is a call out to Republicans and Democrats alike. Stop playing politics. Stop trying to impeach people. Stop trying to do this. Get to work on fixing our immigration issue if you think it's broken. But in the meantime, the law says you cannot come here illegally. And until you change that law, it is wrong to not enforce it. And it is wrong to open borders because it sends a message to the remainder of us law-abiding citizens. Oh, so I guess we're just picking and choosing the laws we're going to enforce now? Because what the federal government themselves is saying, oh, don't worry about that law. Well, if you don't want us to worry about it, change the law. Make it so it's not illegal. Or do whatever you're going to do. But you've got to fix it. You owe it to those people who have done it the right way. You owe it to the American people to do it the right way. And you owe it to the American people to protect your borders. What open borders does is you are using the emotional piece of somebody coming here. You are using that, and the cartel is using that to bring human trafficking and drug trafficking here. They use that as a tool to rape the women, to use children as pawns. That's why we've had 5,000 children in the last month that the cartel has brought here unaccompanied. That is why our neighborhoods are flooded. I had 795 overdoses last year. That's 2 a day for my county. That fentanyl comes from Mexico. It comes across those borders and it comes into our communities illegally. And those are all the byproducts of an open border deal. I am all for immigration and people coming here and making a better life. But until you fix it, you have to uphold the law. And that's what we are asking for, because it really puts us in a predicament when you don't, and when you allow people to pick and choose the laws that you're going to enforce. I know that's a passionate answer to it, but I'm telling you, I am living this. Put your politics aside. I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat or whatever you are. As a sheriff in an area where we deal with immigration issues, it is a crisis. It is a problem, and it is the majority of it is not going to benefit your community or you. Now, we've got to be able to monitor it. We've got to be able to do it in an orderly fashion of letting people into this country through the process. And if you don't like the process, if it's too difficult, which it is, it's messed up, then fix it.
Now, when you say, oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I think those are really important points. I would say this. Now, first off, I want to state, I don't think our borders should by any means be free at all, like the free for all. Because I'm definitely aware of the negative consequences of such a preposterous suggestion. The idea of just opening borders entirely is probably one of the stupidest ideas that I've ever heard. I'm not sure who's exactly calling for that, but besides that, I do.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are calling for it, and that administration's calling for it. This isn't a political thing. These are the people that are saying it openly, that they wanted open borders. So they're the ones that are to blame right now, because they're the ones that have, passed these policies most recently. So that's one thing, is we don't want to ever blame people. Like, we don't ever want people to accept responsibility. They carry the responsibility right now.
And can you tell me what policies they've passed that are deemed as open borders?
Well, let me give you an example. This is not just open, but they took away your checkpoints. They took all the asylum seekers, and it's where they used to be down in Mexico. That was an agreement they had. They just let all those people in. So now they get to live here while they wait for an asylum thing. Now, I know you talked about it. Most of these asylum there are some legit asylum cases. The majority are not legit. And I think you know this, when you seek asylum, you're supposed to seek it to the country next to you. You're not supposed to leapfrog 4 countries into our country for it. That's not how asylum works. So there's a lot of issues involved with that. Well, you just open that up and let all those people in. And now we have the prisons that are in Florence that now ICE will not take them because of the president's policies. Per his orders, we are not deporting those people. So they're finishing up charges federally, and now they're releasing them into Florence, into our community, just releasing them. There's no transportation in Florence. I mean, that little city in Florence can't handle all those people coming out of the prison, coming out of CoreCivic, which is the private institution that houses, the federal inmates. Is that fair to Florence? Is that fair to Pinal County to have that influx of people that we don't even know who they are? Like, we don't know what their backgrounds are or anything. You have Border Patrol that is being changed around. There are a lot of issues going on.
Do you think that immigrants have a right to due process or should have a right to due process?
I mean, what are you talking processed? What's your definition of process?
Within the Constitution. So currently, right now, as it sits, immigration, there are different rights. So if you're a permanent resident, you do have due process rights. If you are an immigrant who, seeks asylum or comes over and you have what's not deemed as illegal entry, but it's no status, there's a very complex set of statuses that are assigned to people depending on how they cross. If they cross by climbing the wall, let's say, or digging under, that's illegal status. Okay, that's pretty cut and dry. So, but if individuals come in and they turn themselves in at the border like they're supposed to for asylum, and by the way, they can come to any port of entry and do so. They could take a flight to the US and land at any point, and right when they get to the gates, claim that they're claiming asylum, and then they would be taken to the
my understanding is that's not how it works. If you're flying in from somewhere else and you're claiming asylum, your asylum should be claimed at the country, to the border, you claim there first. I don't think that you can just fly in. Is that correct?
Yeah. So what happens is, and this gets really complex because the airlines, they don't get to enforce or decide if someone has a case. So you can apply for asylum overseas, or you can choose to come to the US with the understanding that you will be detained pending your asylum case and the outcome. And they have a whole bunch of laws that follow when someone claims asylum, or if they claim to be a refugee. These are different federal laws that apply, and the process is different. And when they claim these statuses, they have their first hearing that is set. The immigration courts are so backlogged. It usually takes, that's a huge problem as well. So to get them, to have a hearing where they either have a bond that's set so that they can be released pending the outcome of their trial. And it's very strict. I've seen a lot of judges turn down bonds just because it's, if they're a flight risk, they don't want them to start integrating into society and escape the court system. So there's a huge interplay, it's very difficult.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to interject something real quick because I don't really want to get into an asylum conversation, because the reason why is I'm not opposed to it. The problem is that that's not my job. My job is to enforce the laws that Congress passed. And I think that all too often people are looking to law enforcement for answers that Congress and Senate and lawyers should be answering, not us. All we are tasked with is enforcing the law. And I think this is a perfect example of where we begin to get questioned about what we deem as appropriate or not appropriate. That's not my job. My job is not to litigate what is appropriate or inappropriate. My job is the people of this country have elected officials who pass laws, and those laws say it is illegal to be in this country without permission. And that is what I'm responsible for. And I work with Border Patrol and ICE for that. So though I would love to, we can do it on a different time, because I'm all about, like, how can we fix this? Like, I'm a big heart guy. I've lived in other countries. I want what's best for people. But if you're asking for me to give you answers for that, that's not my bailiwick. That is not what I'm responsible for. That's what those goofs in Washington who are failing us are responsible for. And not all of them are. Granted, I know some good ones, but many of them are. And Where my job is enforcing the law. Until they change it, that's my job, and I owe it to the people. That's what I said I would do.
Right. And in your training, do they go over the federal laws? And, when you work with ICE, do they kind of go over the different statuses when they enter, and, if it's illegal versus legal, or no status and status? Do they talk
So
about that?
we don't go over that as much, because that's not our responsibility. So if we find somebody that is not here in the country, appears to not be legal or here legally, we contact Border Patrol or ICE. And if ICE has orders to stand down, then they're not coming out there. Then I have no other choice than to release those people into the country. I can't hold them, because per state law, I have no authority to hold them, because it's a federal law and I can't enforce federal law. So, it's a frustrating topic for us, because we are left with no recourse other than to let them into our society. And that is imprudent, and it's irresponsible and reckless on our part. But the law just says we can't hold them. And I think you both, or everybody who's listening to me, would agree that it's not fair to put us in that predicament as law enforcement officials. There is a law that's being broken federally, but I can't enforce it. And yet they're being told to stand down and not do what they're supposed to do, which is enforce immigration and enforce border protection and border security. And there are good men and women that want to do their job, and they're being handcuffed right now. And I see a lot of the memos that come out, and the orders from the White House and the administration as to what they are to not do right now. And it's frustrating. And all Americans should be concerned that we're not following the law. And if you don't be lazy, don't pass executive orders. You have the House and the Senate, go through and pass a law and change it. But in the meantime, I think that it's reckless to change it overnight and not allow for local communities like mine, counties and cities. Poor Yuma's being overrun right now. They didn't ask for that, and they had no time to prepare for that. None of us were given any time to prepare for the changes that have been made. And it is not fair to the Americans. Remember, Americans are first and foremost. Those are the people that have constitutional rights. I don't know, and I think you could contend whether the constitutional rights apply to people that are not citizens of this country. And we have laws that say that they're not supposed to be here unless they have permission or they go through the proper channels. And so it puts us in a really difficult position. So in a long answer, no, we don't necessarily go over all the federal laws, because that's not what our job is, to enforce it. That's what Border Patrol and ICE are there for.
Right.
I think this.
Oh,
Sorry, I was just going to say, in my opinion, this is great, because this is kind of what I wanted to see is, what are some of these frustrations that you do have to deal with? And it's good to have this dialogue to see what it comes up against, and to bring that awareness to the people, because they have no idea what kind of situations you have that you're dealing with on your end. And they have this perception, that whatever that's in their head. And this is good, because it's showing, people what you have to deal with, your perspective, Ashley from her perspective. And I think this is where progress gets made, because, it gets a little bit of everything in the different perspectives, and it kind of illuminates where more light needs to be shed in certain areas. And, there's probably a conversation that would be great to be had with Border Patrol. And I think that would be an important conversation to have as well. And I wanted to ask you, as a public sheriff and officer of peace, operating during this craziness, what are some of your focal points for you personally within, the realm of providing protection for the people that you personally feel would be beneficial to draw people's attention to, that you would you want to stir up some awareness about personally?
I want to interject and get something straight for the
record.
Go ahead. It is absolutely unfair that these executive orders that come out, they are putting law enforcement in very tough position, because they are drastically changing a large set of laws with an executive order. This is something that was not common, in prior presidencies. And it's really difficult, because you know, you as law enforcement are seen as the ones who are supposed to enforce different laws. And you have this issue that it is right, you know, at least in Arizona, because that's at our border. We're dealing with this issue firsthand. And I can see the frustration with law enforcement that they want to just enforce the laws to protect people that they're serving. And that power is stripped away. But at the same time, the weight and the burden of it is still there on your shoulders. And I think that is absolutely unfair. And it's something that, you know, I really hope that people kind of shed light on, that law enforcement has to deal with this issue and this dilemma and how frustrating it is. And, you know, the blame that gets placed, whichever party you follow or support, you know, the ultimate issue is that is being pawned off on law enforcement a lot of times, and it should not be. You know, it is an issue that needs to be fixed at the legislative level. You know, the legislators need to get together and to clean up how these laws are enforced. And it can't just be an overnight decision where you have one administration that has one set of laws, a new administration comes in with different political values, and they change it overnight. It's just not fair to anyone for it to happen.
No, it's not fair to the American people, and you're exactly right. And it's not fair to us. And you know, we're just trying to do our job to protect the people.
Right.
And you know, it's sad that it's become a political issue, because 8 years ago, the same people were on a platform of border security. But now politically, it's more advantageous for them to talk about open borders. So now they flip-flop to the other way. We didn't forget what they said. Now, maybe some Americans did, but these were the same folks that wanted a wall built as well. And then when President Trump wanted it, then they didn't want it. Look, our politicians on both sides, I'm not just talking about one side or the other. Both sides are failing us. And we, you know, it's our own fault, because we're the people that voted him into office. So until we start to figure it out and get better people voted in there that have our hearts, you know, want to serve the people, or term limits. I think term limits is a very viable option to fixing a lot of our issues. So we don't get these folks in there for 30, 40, 50 years. You know, what's funny is we kicked the guy out who wasn't even taking a salary, who came from a whole different business background, wasn't a politician. And we put a guy back in who's completely institutionalized at 48 years in government. He is part of the problem. And I'm not, you know, they're all those guys, whatever party you are, that you've been in there that long, you're part of the problem.
I think term limits would be a phenomenal idea. And I think it's Larry Sabato. There's a book about reforming the Constitution, and he actually does discuss term limits, because it's a real issue when you get, you know, a set of legislators that get very comfortable in their positions. It's a lot of power. And unfortunately, you have, you know, no matter how good of a person someone is who gets into politics, after a time being in that field, you can't help but see, you know, the way that people start to sway towards, well, I'll just help this person out a little bit, and maybe, you know, they'll scratch my back, I'll scratch theirs. That mentality doesn't benefit the people, and they're supposed to be working for the people. And this is a government that's supposed to be by the people. And I think that we have lost a lot of sight of that. Founding fathers talk about it, you know, when they were drafting the Constitution. There's the Federalist Papers. I don't know if you've read. It's a compilation of different letters from Madison, Hamilton, and Jay, and then letters from Brutus. He's an anonymous writer, but it's our founding fathers discussing, you know, all of the thought that went into this country and our laws. And you know, it was for very different reasons, and it was very wholesome, and it was with a concept of liberty and freedom and property and working hard and that American dream. And I believe that we have so much removed from those initial concepts as time goes on, and taken those things for granted. So
yes, definitely. So I was wanting to get your thoughts on, what are your thoughts on maybe training police officers and for you, is there anything you would do as far as wanting to implement different improved training for officers in any way, or do you feel like it's pretty good the way it is, or it is a matter of maybe state funding, or what are your thoughts on all of that?
No, there is always room for improvement in anything. I think it's unfair to throw a blanket across all law enforcement in this country and say that all law enforcement needs reform. I think there's a lot of places and agencies that are doing a really good job and they work really hard. I would say that most of us would tell you we don't have enough funding for training. That's not a state issue. That's you need more funding. Here's the issue is I might have funding for training, but I don't have enough bodies on the street. I have a responsibility to the taxpayer to put X amount of deputies on the street to deal with the calls. That's what government's primary responsibility is. And I don't necessarily have enough officers to always send my guys to the amount of training I would want. So if you truly wanted to fix law enforcement, the conversation shouldn't be about defunding police. It should be actually about getting more funding to police so that we can properly train. And the other issue is let's say I have a deputy who goes out and maybe he has a little disagreement with his wife before he leaves because he doesn't make that much money and there's bills that need to be paid. And the first call he goes to is a 1-year-old baby who's been molested by the stepdad. What kind of mental state do you think that deputy is in to continue to go respond to calls? But unfortunately, I don't have any extra staffing. There's nobody on the bench. So what do I have to do? The guy has to continue to respond to calls. And what happens is now that deputy is maybe not in the best mental state of mind to be able to respond to calls. So when you talk about defunding, really it should be more funding so that we can train properly and have adequate staffing to be able to address mental health issues amongst our staff to avoid issues or collisions with the community. When somebody responds and they're in a bad state of mind because of the suicide they just went to or a domestic they just had to go respond to. That's what we deal with, the reality of it. And so I wish the narrative would change to let's fund our police appropriately so that we can take care of it. I keep hearing this like, well, let's take money away and let's put it towards programs, community programs. I'll be honest with you, the majority of those programs exist already. The fact that you don't know about them shows how inadequate and failing they are. So you can't throw good money after bad money. For the most part, law enforcement does an excellent job. The sustained complaint rate is so extremely low. The problem is that the media wants to jump on anything that they think can show us in a bad light, and they get their narrative out there first. And so they don't wait for all the facts. They only take a little snippet of a video. They don't show all the facts. And so the public believes, oh, look, that's what happened. Well, when the facts start to come out, it doesn't always go their way, but they've already set the narrative. And so we've got to there's a lot of issues that we need to address, but I don't think that the issue is necessarily solely on the shoulders of police or talking police from. That's unfair to all the good men and women who put this badge on every day and and go out and deal with the calls that none of us want to deal with or should ever have to deal with in their life. And they do it over and over and over again and get very little thanks for it. And so that's a long answer to we need more training, but it's and I think every administrator out there is going to tell you, head of agency is going to tell you, we'd love to train our guys more, but I can't do it with the staffing I currently have.
I wish that people would look at law enforcement the way that they look at our nurses and our doctors right now with COVID. What they're asking you to do is basically saying, okay, we want you to go do this job and go do it perfectly, but we don't have enough funding for you. And we're not going to give you the protection that you need, the training that you need, the bodies that you need for the staffing. And then when you make a mistake, they lump all sheriff's officers into one category and say, oh, well, it's the whole, we just need to defund the police in general. That's like having a nurse make a mistake because she's been pulling, a longer shift than she's supposed to because they're understaffed, short-staffed. She's the only one who's willing to take that, or he, okay? And then after the mistake is made, saying, well, it's your fault. Even though the hospital is understaffed, this is your fault. You don't see
And
that compassion in that field, but you don't see that compassion for our police force. And to me, that is something we really need to think about.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm going to blow your mind. I think there was 980 deaths in 2019 from police shootings. Yet there was like 250,000 malpractice deaths. You don't hear people wanting to hang the, to reform law, medical field or nursing. For that matter, there are teachers who molest kids. Is that fair to say that all teachers are sexual predators or child predators? No, absolutely not. That's not fair to say that. It is not fair to impugn one race for the actions of one person of that race. You can't say because that white guy went and robbed that bank that all white people are bank robbers. It's just not fair. It's not fair to say that all police are bad because of the actions of one or two police. And then when we look at it, when you really crack into it, the issues that we've seen where those cases, the most hotly contested cases, they weren't even held guilty. They weren't even found guilty of those things. They were only guilty in the court of public opinion because of the way it was turned. And that's not to say that mistakes aren't made and that mistakes weren't made in some of these high profile cases. What I'm just saying is that it is unfair to impugn the entire industry when we have a far better track record than most industries out there for fulfilling our responsibility. And I'm glad you brought that up, because you can look at those statistics. I may be a little bit off, but I'm pretty sure that they're somewhere in that ballpark. There was a heck of a lot more malpractice deaths than there were police deaths. Yet I don't hear anybody talking about wanting to change how doctors are go through school.
I think that a lot of it has to do with, the way that media does paint certain roles. I was a dispatcher for Phoenix Fire for a couple of years before I went to undergrad, and I come from a family of firefighters. And we would get calls to the alarm room and they would say, "Anyone die yet?" That was the type of, sentiment that we got from the media. Just very, kind of cold. And I'm not saying that all, in the same token, I'm not saying that all people that work for the media are that way, but that was very common. And I think that, with other industries, even with firefighters, my father was a firefighter for 25 years. And he said to me, we get painted as heroes. I can remember one death on the fire department, and that was Brett Tarver. And he had gone into a fire, and that was something that we talked about for years. We had training because he left the line, and this was just for dispatchers, and then the firefighters had training. But police officers die every day at a much higher rate. The statistics are a lot higher in that field because it is more dangerous. Firefighters are fighting fires. It's not a job where, they're fighting a person or protecting people or having to make these split-second decisions that are dealing with two lives, right? They have to decide who's innocent and who is the person that needs to be apprehended in a split second. Firefighters don't have that. Their job is tough as well. I'm just saying that I think that people don't really think of things in that way because, they see what they watch on the news, and, there's not any other side to it for a fire. The fire is the bad guy. With police officers, you've always got, two individuals when you're dealing with a crime, and you're dealing with a lot of split-second decisions. And how much harder is that when you've got a staff that doesn't have support from their community, is constantly being, berated because of a mistake of one officer, and it gets implicated to all of them. So it's a real issue that we need to fix and support our police officers.
I agree. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Protect America Now. Can you tell me a little bit about the intention of this entity you've created and kind of the mission behind it?
Yeah, Ashley kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. We are trying to gather people, sheriffs together to stand up for the rule of law, to fight, for the constitutional rights of the American people, and also to be able to address these issues and to bridge the gap between communities and law enforcement across this country where those relationships have been strained. And so we believe that the sheriffs are one of the last line of defenses for the people. We are elected by the people. We represent the people. That's what we work for. And so sheriffs gathering together, and we're hoping that we already have a ton more sheriffs that want to get involved. And we hope American people will get involved. I mean, in the first few weeks, we've had 10,000 people sign up, and we've been able to raise some good funds. Unfortunately, to be able to affect change in this country, money is a key part of it, especially when it comes to politicians and talking to them. You can't just tell them you're going to work to stand against their policies. If they believe you don't carry any weight or there's no bite behind your bark, they're not going to pay any mind to you. So we hope to be able to put a good, strong organization together that stands up for the rule of law, the Constitution, and fights against bad policies that politicians would enact in this country. And you can check it out at protectamericanow.com. Please get involved. We want to have the American people involved. This is not a party line thing. This is just us standing up for the people and looking out for the best interest of the people.
And you have a book out too, is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm no author. So if you read the book or if you've read the book, I'm going to put my caveat on there. I'm just one of these guys that punches things off the list in life. We only live one life, and I continue to try to challenge myself and be the best me that I can be. So I wrote a book called American Sheriff, Traditional Values in a Modern World. My wife wrote a book also called The Sheriff's Wife, Holding It All Together Behind the Scenes in Politics. Gives you a look at what it's like, from her perspective of being married to somebody who's been a little bit in the limelight, but also an elected official. And then mine touches on just, I think, traditional values that we've lost touch with here in America. And hopefully people can, get a better understanding of who I am, what has made me the patriot that I am, what has developed this love of freedom that I have, and hopefully find peace in the fact that they're not alone with some of the values that I think we've lost our way with in this country. And, family and belief in a higher being, whether it's God or whatever it is you believe in. I believe that being grounded in those things are important. So hopefully you'll go on, check it out. You can get it at Amazon, or you can get it at AmericanSheriff.com. I personalize all those books. You can get my wife's book there as well.
Beautiful. Is there any last messages or just anything you want to put out there and share with the listeners? Anything at all?
I'm just grateful you guys brought me on. We talked about some very important issues, some very serious issues tonight, and I think it's good that people hear the different perspectives on these issues. But in the end, I hope that anybody listening tonight will just understand that I love my community. I love this country. I love Americans. I don't care what your race, your political background is, your religious background is. I want to protect all people from bad people, from government overreach, or whatever it is. I want to be able to protect this country. I love it. I believe in God, family, freedom. I always say God, guns, and freedom, but I believe in God, family, freedom, and the importance of that. And I just appreciate you letting me on here to talk about these issues and discuss them, because they are truly important issues that are facing all of us here in America.
All right. Amen to that. Well, thank you again. And this was great. I'm very happy about this, and I'm excited to put it out there and share it. So just thank you again.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. Ashley, thank you. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, it's been great having you on. And I can tell that you are genuine and that you really do care about your job and the people you work with. And it's nice to see that in law enforcement, because those are the ones that I think that we need really in that field and to kind of lead the way for a lot of these things. So,
well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Philosophical Minds podcast. If you've enjoyed any of the content that you've heard today, I'd like to support the show. You can do so over at paypal.me/philosophicalminds. That is paypal.me/philosophicalminds.